This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Is honored to have on the one and only pioneer, trailblazer, investigative journalist extraordinaire, MacArthur Grant recipient, Genius Grant recipient, none other than Brother Jerry Mitchell of the Clarion-ledger. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we got a lot that I want to touch upon because this year it's not an anniversary with the civil rights movement, pivotal moments, and also you have been very key in opening up cold cases from Medgar to the Mississippi burning case to even a little bit touches of Emmett Till.
Right.
I just want to get your thoughts upon, we're approaching the 60th anniversary of the Emmett Till murder, and I know a lot of people are making a lot of ado about the fact that Carolyn Bryant was not charged.
She wasn't indicted in 2007. There was a LaFleur County grand jury that had the opportunity to indict her, obviously, and chose not to indict her. It was, the question arises that we don't know what all the grand jury was told. I know that the FBI agent who investigated the case felt like she should have been indicted. So it's just, they decided against it. To be honest, it's a very tough case, and what you're trying to prove is that she's an accessory before the fact. Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate part of it is because everybody's dead almost, she's able to come back and basically say, well, I didn't want to do anything to them, they wanted to, those kind of things. So it makes it a lot, it makes it difficult for prosecutors. I'm not taking their side. I'm just saying I'm sure they're thinking on that.
And also the fact that, we had a black prosecutor that was involved.
Yeah, I was an African-American district attorney. I believe the grand jury itself was majority African-American, if I recall correctly. It was a tough case. Again, I know the FBI agent who investigated the case was very upset that the indictment wasn't brought.
So, I know people said there was other possible people involved.
There's no question about that. There's no question about that. There were other people involved. That was testimony even at the time. Willie Reed, testified that he saw, I believe, 6 men total that day where Emmett Till was taken out and beaten in the barn. So he identified. He said there were basically 6 men, 3 white and 3 African American.
So you think that this case is really just over with now since they couldn't bring in charges of Carolyn?
Well, that would be the only other way you could, and she's obviously still alive. If they were going to bring a case, that she's still alive, so your suspect in the case is alive, so if they were gonna bring a case, they would have to bring it obviously now as opposed to later.
Well, it's like Miss Bryant is kind of a recluse. Have anybody been successful in getting her to talk about the case at all?
I've heard that she got interviewed for, for a book, but I don't really know the details about it.
Okay, cool. So I want to move on to the Mississippi burning case. I know you was pivotal in that as well. And I came to find out, I think it was like last year, that Olin Birch passed away, the guy who
it's recent years he's passed away, sure has.
Yeah, I mean, you ever had a chance to engage Mr. Birch?
Actually, I did talk to him, asked him about, I started asking him about the case and about the, the bodies being found on his property, and he hung up the phone.
But he was like a very wealthy man. What type of person was he?
He was.
What was his perception in that community? How did people view him?
Well, the people who knew him, I've known some people who have known him and had positive perceptions of him. He was, as you mentioned, wealthy. He had a trucking company that he ran. And in fact, one of the people he employed at one point was Cecil Price, who, of course, then died in a quote-unquote accident on his property after he began cooperating with the authorities. So
Cecil Price was a deputy sheriff at the time?
He's a deputy that arrested the 3 civil rights workers at the time, put them in jail, and then, of course, later released them into kind of the hands of the waiting Klansmen.
So I know also, Edgar Ray Killen, the preacher, with the jail. He's in prison currently for that. Could there be any other people brought up on charges that's still around? Are there anybody still around?
What you got to have is somebody who's involved. Now you have one of the guys that was charged is still alive. Is Pete? I can't think of the last name. Pete Smith, I think. But anyway, he was allegedly the head of the Klan Bureau of Investigation in that community for the Klan. But he did not go with the killing party. Now, the allegation is that he made telephone calls and that kind of stuff, gathering Klansmen together that night. And basically, there were the 2 carloads of guys that went up to Neshoba County and were waiting there when the 3 civil rights workers got out of jail. Okay.
Well, what about it? Was not the land that the civil rights workers were buried on? Was it was it getting subsidized by the government by any chance?
And there may have been some federal monies involved, like for example, the dam itself. There may have been some federal monies involved. It wasn't federal property. It was Olin Burge owned that property, and that's where the bodies were buried. He denied knowing anything about that, but to me, kind of the interesting detail in response to that is there's a bulldozer running on your property at midnight. I can't imagine that's a usual sound, you know what I mean, that you've got guys running a bulldozer at midnight on your property anyway, but that's what he claimed, is that, they were, he knew nothing about any of this, that he was just shocked, to find out there were bodies buried on his property.
Do you think people are aware of, or were aware of his role in that incident?
Well, some of them were. It's certainly been written about. I've certainly written about it. Others have written about it. There were a lot of. There were more than 20 people involved in that killing, like who were indicted or identified or whatever in that killing. So there's a lot of folks involved.
Oh, wow. And also the Medgar Evers case, you was very awesome. You got your blueprint on that as well, fingerprint.
Yeah, that was a fascinating case. That was the first case that I worked on, that came to trial. And Medgar Evers was obviously field secretary for the Mississippi NAACP. Medgar Evers began fighting for civil rights when he got back from World War II. And he and his brother Charles went to go and try and vote on Medgar Evers' 21st birthday. They went to try to register to vote in Decatur, Mississippi. Got to the courthouse and they got turned away by an armed white mob. Wow. And so Medgar Evers said later, talking about that, he said, "I swore I'd never be whipped again."
Wow. Okay. That's interesting, because I know there was key Byron Dale Beckwith. There was a guy named.
Yeah, Byron Dale Beckwith is the man who killed him later on in 1963. Also a World War II veteran, interestingly. Medgar Evers fought in Normandy. And so he was part of that wave of soldiers that came through Normandy.
D-Day.
Securing. He wasn't on D-Day, but the guys that came behind, because they had to, remember, they're still under fire, you know what I mean? And they're trying to establish a beachhead, and they're expanding that. And so Medgar Evers was a part of that. He was also a part of what they call the Red Ball Express, which played a really critical role in World War II supplies, because you can be soldier and you can be out fighting, but you don't have any supplies, you don't have any ammunition, for example, or food. It's not going to do you much good. And so the Red Ball Express was just absolutely critical in what they did. And he was involved in that. And so he came back determined. He had fought racism in the Nazis, and he came back determined to fight it in his own state. And so he was involved in civil rights before Brown versus Board of Education. So that was, like I said, that was in 46. So Brown wasn't until 54. And he was involved in a campaign up in the Delta. They had these bumper stickers that said, "Don't buy gas where you can't use the restroom." And so he was a part of that with Dr. T.R.M. Howard and some others.
Right, cool. So I heard this as well, that it was more than one person involved in the killing of Medgar Evers. May have been. There's no question that Beckwith, pulled the trigger, and his gun was found near the scene where it had been stuffed into a honeysuckle brush and had his fingerprint on it and everything. So I think Beckwith thought he got away with it. He didn't realize he left a fingerprint on the gun. The fingerprint's underneath the scope. Okay. So as if where it would be when you clean the gun. Or it's not from from handling the gun or from other way, but it would be where you would hold it if you're cleaning your gun. Interesting. And so I don't think he thought he had a fingerprint on it. Now, was it true that the government paid for his property so he could have a defense? Like they brought land from him to build a post office?
I think they did buy that land from him later and build a post office. I think that's actually correct. Yeah.
So was that money used for his defense?
Oh, no, that was later on. That was after his two trials were over with in '64 that they bought his property.
And also was a documentary that came out called Spies in Mississippi.
Yeah, there was. So
how complicit was the government of Mississippi in these assassinations, in these things that happened?
Well, it's a good question. Unfortunately, there's no piece of paper you can point to and say, "Oh, there you go. We've got proof that they were involved in this." But what you can say is there is proof that they were in regular communication with a lot of these Klan guys. For example, right after the 3 civil rights workers disappeared, there's this long correspondence. I say correspondence, it's actually reports. So their agent was dealing directly every day in Neshoba County with the sheriff and deputy sheriff. Wow. And so one of the very first reports, you can look it up, it's online now, it says, "Oh, there's no Klan here." Yeah, because the sheriff told him. Of course, the sheriff was in the Klan, and the deputy sheriff were in the Klan, and so anyway, but that's the kind of stuff that was going on back then, and it's very much a nod and a wink to a lot of things that were going on. The guy that was back to the Till case, the guy that was the defense lawyer for these killers, and they admitted they killed Emmett Till. He said, "Well, we've got to have our Miloms and Bryants, basically to carry out our dirty work, that kind of thing." And I think that kind of speaks volumes.
So that's cool. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about Senator James Eastland.
Yeah,
his involvement in the Till case. I mean, we talk about how right now what's going on.
He leaked the information about Emmett Till's dad. Emmett Till's dad was killed in Italy, hung. And so it's right after these guys walk away, but it's right before a grand jury's getting ready to consider whether to indict these guys for kidnapping. See, that they were indicted for murder in one county, and so, but they had admitted to kidnapping him, and so, but yet the grand jury didn't indict, and that was released right before that.
But Emmett Till's dad was accused of raping and killing white women.
Right, exactly, in Italy, and they hung him allegedly for that, and you know, and he was one of there were quite a number of African American soldiers. It's kind of an untold story who were hung during World War II, and so yeah.
And the reason why I bring it up, because I think it's an interesting pattern coming today. Like, you know, Mike Brown. Yeah. A lot of people now, like the victim as a thug or victim as
that's
guilty of something. Right.
They got to be guilty of something if we killed them.
And I don't think about the Emmett Till case. I remember reading about that. I tell people this is like nothing new, because people were saying, well, Trayvon Martin or Mike Brown ain't on Emmett Till. I said, well, Emmett Till was no Emmett Till, according to the press.
Well, you know, I mean, at trial, Carolyn Bryant claimed that he grabbed her, and there was this whole long story about all this stuff, which was obviously a lie. And so, you know, it's age old. You know, just like the supposedly in Rosewood case, you know, where the black town in Florida was burned down. The allegation, I have no idea what's true or not, but the allegation was that the woman who claimed she was raped may indeed have been having a relationship with the man there, and that, which led to that whole thing. So yeah, it's those kind of things are age old.
Well, the same thing like when I talk about the Willie McGee case here in Mississippi.
Yeah, Willie McGee.
Yeah, I met a resident, a white resident. She was older. She was from there. I met her in Memphis doing a book signing for the author. And she said that it was well known that the woman allegedly was having an affair with Willie McGee. Yeah, she was a white lady that said that.
And that came out in that trial. I mean, his third trial is when he actually said that. You know, actually, I was having an affair with her.
But do that warrant like a death penalty though? I mean, I know he raped.
I'm not disputing that at all. I'm just saying that, yeah, it's what I meant by age old. It's these kind of things. It was any situation like that. It was always, oh yeah, this is the worst person ever, and you know, kind of portrayed people in that light. So therefore, they were justified in whatever they did. And of course, as you all know, there were lynchings for many, many years. I mean, you're talking about McGee was actually an execution,
right?
And we can question maybe the findings in that. But let's just talk about lynchings. I mean, there were 500 and something lynchings, I think,
that we know of.
And your point's well taken. You know, that we know of, documented ones, and we don't have there are many others, I'm sure, that were.
Yeah, like even like the Charles Mack Parker case down. You know, like somebody said, I think Professor Howard Smith, that was the last classic lynching in America.
Maybe so, and maybe that's the last classic lynching. I mean, I don't know. It depends on what you count as a lynching. You know, how you define that term. I mean, maybe. Although, to me, I don't know why you wouldn't include Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner in that too, because that's kind of a classic lynching. Because you've got a mob, and you even have a law enforcement officer involved. So I mean. That to me is a pretty classic lynching as well. I mean, I guess taking him from the jail, maybe that aspect, but that's the same thing with the 3 civil rights workers. They were in jail, got released. So anyway.
Do you ever get a chance to talk to anybody like Charles Mundy, the guy who was in the jail cell with Charles Mack Parker?
Yeah, I talked to him.
Really? How was that conversation?
Well, he just talked about that night about how that. They came in and grabbed him. In fact, interestingly, I don't know if you're interested in this or not, but the jail that he was in, still there. Now the bars are gone.
Wow.
But you can actually, if you go, I think it's the circuit clerk's office, they just use it as storage now. And you can actually go in there and go in there in Poplarville. And you can see where it was upstairs where Parker was. So you can literally see where it was, where the cell was, where, being dragged down where he was dragged down the steps. And Money was telling me that, he was like they were dragging him where his head was hitting the steps. Mm-hmm. And there was literally a trail of blood, from the jail all the way outside. So,
also, they crossed state lines too. I mean, they found his body in Louisiana, correct?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It could have been prosecuted as a federal crime, and they didn't do it. That's what the feds should have done. But
did people assume? 'Cause I know it's like Professor Smead assumed that he was guilty, but a lot of folks say he was innocent.
Yeah, Smead, you get the impression from Smead's book for sure that he did it. Mm-hmm. And I've heard the opposite. I don't know. I mean, it's not one that I've dug deep enough down that I know one way or the other what's true or not. But it doesn't matter in my book, because the guy wasn't given his day in court. And here he was 3 or 4 days from just going on trial. And they grab him out of the cell and take him out and kill him. I mean, that's murder. That's murder. And we can't allow that in a civilized society. So.
But the fact that people knew the people that were involved,
everybody knew everybody involved, and there's no question about that. Yeah.
So what do you think about now? Fast forward to now, what's going on in police brutality cases? Baltimore and Ferguson. Do you think it's like the same old stuff?
Well, it certainly reminds you of some of these cases. I mean, look at that video the other day of that in North Carolina, the video.
South Carolina,
was it South Carolina? Mm-hmm. And you saw the video of the guy literally trying to get away, and the officer emptying his gun into him. Oh, it was awful. How can anybody justify that? I mean, how can anybody in there? You saw the officer even come back over and throw the taser. It's like, it makes you realize when you have video like that, this happens far more often. And, maybe people are always saying, oh, well, no, they would have never planted evidence, or no, they would have never. Obviously, he must have had a gun or tried to do something, because he would have never shot him cold-bloodedly in the back. Yeah, he did. Mm-hmm. and you got video, and there is no question. And so it just reminds you, like you're talking about before, about what can happen, unfortunately, sometimes is people will try to vilify. Right. And that's the unfortunate thing. I mean, you see these things, and we have video now of seeing these things for ourselves, and we're not have to have, and people trying to vilify these guys, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's no reason. Just almost every one of these lives could have been spared. Almost every one of them. I mean, there's no reason for doing what they did. If they had just followed police protocol, if you're being honest, these guys would all still be alive. And of course, the one down Trayvon, I mean, it was it wasn't a police officer at all. Our Fruitdale case down in Oakland. I mean, it's the same deal. I mean, it wasn't a real police officer. It wasn't, it was a security guy. And so, what are you doing? You know what I mean? I mean, and it's just, anyway.
No, it's good to bring up, like, even like with the what happened recently here with the Otis Bird case.
Right.
What's your thoughts about that case? In your mind? I mean, I haven't heard really too much.
I don't know that much about it, to be honest with you. So I mean, I'd feel inadequate. Oh, you're talking about is that the one that was down, the hanging down there?
Yeah,
oh, okay, yeah. That's the one. I know what case you're talking about. I'd forgotten the name on it. Yeah, I mean, authorities are obviously saying it's a suicide. He was found hanging. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know enough details about it to know one way or the other. I think there are two things that work. One is obviously the past, where there were lynchings and all these things taking place, where black men would be hung and there wouldn't be any questions asked and it would just allowed to happen, like we're talking about these lynchings. And then the other phenomenon that's going on more recently, which is sad, is there's been an increase in the numbers of suicides among African Americans, and it's sad to see. And so that, I'm not saying that's what happened in his case, but what I'm trying to say is, unfortunately, it does happen in some cases. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it possible. Do you think it's strange that every case of a black person, of a black man found hanging in Mississippi is a suicide? I mean, this is going back to the last 20
and you're exactly right. No, you're exactly right. And that's what I'm talking about. There were so many lynchings that took place. You're right. They got, it's like the old joke. It's like the old joke about, a black guy being weighted down and found in the river.
Right.
You go, well, like a gin fan or whatever it was. Well, you shouldn't have tried and stolen that gin fan. You know what I mean? Like he's completely weighted down with the gin fan. And so, that kind of crap is awful. And you're right. And that's why you've got to thoroughly investigate these things. I think the FBI's looking into the Byrd case now, and so we'll see what they come up with.
But they haven't ruled it a suicide yet, right?
No, the FBI is not.
Actually, like this.
That's what I'm saying. So let's kind of wait and see what the FBI comes back and says.
Well, my thing about the Otis Byrd case was kind of, it's peculiar to me. I'm going to say, because the state better than I do, the history and all this stuff.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
Okay, he killed a white lady, Lucille Trim.
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah, but it was a capital murder case, right? He was convicted. How many people that kill a white lady in Mississippi and get out of jail years later? Now
that's true. I mean, that's a good
life in prison.
That's a valid point. I don't know the details of what he was convicted of and stuff like that. But yeah, he's any kind of case like that. I think that's why it's good that the FBI is looking into the case.
And also another thing too, her daughter. I don't know if you know her daughter, Martha Rainville. She's a retired U.S. Air Force Major General.
Wow.
And she worked high up in the Department of Homeland Security on the Michael Chertoff.
Wow.
And her husband is Paul McKell. He's a former congressman from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And he was Assistant Secretary of Defense. So I'm just saying. In 2006, right? She ran for a U.S. Congressperson for Vermont as a Republican. But I'm saying the lady he killed was no ordinary person. If she got a daughter like that, with those type of political
there's political pull and connection and power and all that kind of stuff.
I'm not saying people like this kind of strange.
No, but I understand what you're saying, and point well taken, and that's why I think it's good that the FBI is looking at it. Hopefully, at least if nothing else, provide some more information about it. I don't really, even though they just say suicide, we don't know the details, like what did they're like markings, for example. If you're choked, for example, let's say you're choked to death, there are certain things that supposedly happen compared to if you hang hang yourself, or were there any defensive wounds, different things like that you can look for.
Well, with the Freddie Jermaine Carter case, the guy was found hanging in Greenwood, down in the right neighborhood. I went back there, and the thing about it was the coroner said that he was there for 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
So if he hanged himself from that tree, people that morning should have saw his body hanging from that tree, and not afternoon. I mean, because there's a dog pound back there. I've been back there with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and with the state senator.
Well, then they should have found him sooner.
He was
the coroners, and the thing is about coroners in Mississippi is they don't know. I mean, most of them, they're not doctors. They don't have medical training.
Right.
They don't have that kind of training, and so therefore, I could be elected coroner. I mean, I have like zero medical experience, zero medical training, and I could be elected coroner.
So it's a political position mostly.
It's just, I'm telling you, it's a political position.
A lot of people don't know that though. A lot of people in the general public assume that these folks, they look at
they have no medical
TV shows. It must be.
The coroner in Mississippi has zero experience, and so there may be a few, but that's the vast majority. And so that leads to problems in the criminal death investigation system. And so, and you have these pathologists come in, and they presumably should help with those kinds of things, try to help sort these things out. But the pathologists also have to rely on the investigation itself. So if you don't have a good investigation to start with, it can hurt that on the back end as well.
Let me ask you this, because I know the case of the young man found hanging in a tree in North Carolina.
Right.
He was found hanging in a white, basically a trailer park with white people on a swing set.
Right.
With shoes that were not his own, with clothes not his own. And he was also dating a much older white woman, who was 31 years old. And they said that was a suicide. I mean.
No, I know.
I mean, like, what's going on?
Usually, hanging is not usual preference of suicide. I mean, most people.
Not for black people, I don't think. This is the history.
Most people who, most people who commit suicide generally do it by, males tend to do it in the South, particularly in the South, tend to do it with guns.
Right.
And things like that. So, anyway.
But what is, like, why is it such a disconnect? I know people, like, even what happened in Baltimore last week, folks are really mad about, they're burning down their own communities and whatnot. But yet, you could look at a couple weeks earlier when the University of Kentucky lost their basketball game against Wisconsin. You had the University of Kentucky kids burning down Kentucky, and nobody called them thugs and criminals. But yet, what's more valid reason to riot? Because, like Dr. King said, riot is a language unheard, right?
Right.
When your life is extinguished or not considered anything,
right.
When you could get a higher bail for wrecking a car than for killing a black person. Why can't, I want to ask you as a white person,
sure.
Why can't white folks, majority of white people, understand the frustration of black people?
Well, and they should, and they got to understand it from a historical perspective. Whites typically think, or I'm speaking for them, I guess.
Right.
But a lot of whites, this is what they think. Not every white, but a lot of whites out there will think like, or let's just say some whites. Some whites will have the opinion. They'll be like, they just feel like the past is the past. Like, let's not talk about that. Let's not bring it up. And of course, I encountered that in doing these cases. It's like, leave the past alone. Don't deal with that. They kind of want to call it the unpleasant time, and things like that. And unpleasant. People got killed. It's not unpleasant. I mean, it was more than unpleasant. So anyway, So you got part of that going on, and then you got some other whites as well, maybe some of the same ones, that have just frankly prejudice. I mean, let's just be honest, they're prejudiced. And therefore, they have certain thoughts and feelings, and they're going to embrace things that reinforce those stereotypes, negative racist stereotypes. And I think that falls into that. It doesn't mean everybody that said that is a racist, but I'm telling you, there's part of that behind that. And so therefore, if African Americans, like you're saying, if they riot or whatever it is, then they, or like what happened in Kentucky, probably didn't get called a riot. You know what I mean?
So it's letting out some frustration.
Yeah, exactly.
Young kids, even in Alabama when they win, roll tide, just state pride.
Yeah,
there's really a lot of pride.
Blowing off steam. Set fire and all that stuff.
But then, it wasn't until the baseball game couldn't get played in front of people that people started paying attention. Right. And also, you got the Preakness coming up in a couple of weeks.
That's right.
The one part of the Triple Crown horse racing thing. So really, is it about money? If you want to get their attention, you got to mess with people's money.
I guess so. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. I think the unfortunate part is, I think it's both. I mean, I think both are unfortunate. I think, killing somebody. I mean, it's like the idea of that we as officers have justification. Your point is to try to preserve life, not to take life.
Right.
And well-trained, anybody in law enforcement, and I know some of, a number of these guys that are in law enforcement, they hate what happened in this situation. You know what I mean? It's not like they're going like, yeah, that was a bad guy and he deserved it. They're going, what the heck? You know, I mean, why would you do that? And like what happened in South Carolina the other day, the officer shooting, just cold-blooded murder, just shooting the guy in the back.
But we don't catch how often did it happen off camera. That's the scary part.
That's what I'm talking about. No, I agree with you. That's the scary part, is how many times now law enforcement say, oh yeah, the guy had a gun, or he did this, or he had that. So now you wonder, okay, the gun he had, was that his gun, or did you put it there? You know what I mean? Those kind of things. And so I think it's an unfortunate situation. Both the killing is unfortunate, the outrage is absolutely understandable, but I do think it's unfortunate that you know places of business and homes and people's community gets burned. I mean, that's awful. I mean, I think that's not a good thing either. So.
Well, let me ask you this: like, what's been your favorite story to cover or break? What's been your favorite? You got a favorite story?
It's like children, you know. Ask a question. Who's my favorite child? I've enjoyed them all. But the thing to me that's been the real, you mentioned some of the awards, which has been nice, but the real payoff to me has been getting to know the families, and that's been worth more than any award that I've won, is getting to know the families. Not too long ago, got to spend some time with the Vernon Damer family. We were talking to some high school kids, and just the other day I was talking to Medgar daughter, and these are just, my life has been so blessed getting to know these families, and I just feel very humbled and honored to have been able to meet them and get to know them, and to have, been able to play a part in these reopenings and re-prosecutions. There's a verse, and I love this. It says, when justice comes, there is joy. And I just love that. Joy to the righteous and terror to the evildoers.
Sounds good.
I like that.
Sounds almost a George W. Bush like, the evildoer thing.
Yeah.
But effective.
Well, but people who kill people, like we're talking about, should be allowed to get away with it. In other words, it's politically expedient to let them get away with it. It's, they don't want to cause a problem, so they're letting them get away with it. Or whatever the reason is, whether you've got police officers killing people or people killing police officers or whatever the situation is, people should not be allowed to get away with that. I mean, it just is, it's wrong. And so that's what justice is about. And as you well know, the work you've been involved in, justice is about more than just what happens in the courtroom.
Right.
It's about what happens in everyday life. Justice is about, how do I treat the poor? Am I treating the poor differently than I'm treating the rich? Or am I treating the rich differently than I am the average person? So if there's a distinction there, that's like they just had that series on that rich guy, Durst guy.
Oh yeah, the Jinx.
And so how many killings or disappearances did this guy get away with? And why was he never prosecuted? Hacked someone he literally cut somebody's body into pieces and threw it in the ocean. And in plastic bags, and they washed up, they caught him, they figured him out, and they didn't convict that guy.
But he had a jury of his peers, right?
He had very rich, he was very rich, and he spent, I think, $1.5 million on lawyers.
So it really is all about, it's really a money thing. It's like,
I think that, and I hate to say that about our justice system, But I think if you have money, there is a much different system of justice.
Olin Burridge. I mean, Edgar Ray Killings, he was poor white trash. I mean, it would classify him as poor white trash, right? But Olin Burridge was wealthy.
This is probably not, this may not be a popular example to use, but I'll say it, OJ.
Mm-hmm. He go for it, lawyer, right?
The thing with OJ, OJ had money.
Right.
OJ had money. How many lawyers do you have? I mean, and so I hate to say that, but it's true because I've seen it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the poor guys that can't afford a lawyer and want kind of legal representation.
Right.
I've seen it with my own eyes. I mean, I've seen it. I was like, here I am, not a lawyer, a reporter.
Right.
And I'm sitting through trials where this guy is on trial literally for his life. Mm-hmm. And he's got a lawyer that I could do a better job. And I'm not saying I know anything, but
right.
That's sad. That's sad. That's sad. And we shouldn't have two separate systems of justice for the poor and for the rich. Unfortunately, what happens, at least in some cases, and this is being proved true,
mm-hmm.
is you've got guys, women too, who are convicted, who are innocent. There are people behind bars who are innocent, mm-hmm. and DNA every day is proving that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The DNA comes back and goes, yep, it wasn't him that raped her, it's somebody else behind bars.
Oh, wow.
Who raped and killed her, it's somebody else. And he's already behind bars. Or he's walking around. Like two kids that got killed up in Newton County, mm-hmm. and two little girls. This is awful, 3-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And these two guys one of them was on death row, one of them was not. They were in prison for years and years and years. DNA comes back finally. Both of them innocent, fingered the guy that actually did it.
Wow.
And now he got prosecuted and he's in prison now.
But how do you get those years back? How can you come to
You don't get those years back. And that's why justice has to, as best as possible, try to be blind. And we're blind in the sense of I'm not looking at how wealthy this person is or how poor this person is, or as a police officer perspective, don't just grab the first person you see. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That kind of thing. And a lot of it, unfortunately, can be laziness.
But this is a great segue into your thoughts about Curtis Flowers, the Curtis Flowers case, because really he was the only suspect.
I don't know a ton of detail. I don't know.
The Mississippi State Supreme Court recently turned down.
Yeah.
I actually covered that appeal.
Right.
In July.
That's right. I know what case you're on now.
Yeah.
I don't really know that much about it. But it's interesting. I mean, some of these things are interesting. I like, was that a shaken baby case? Was that a shaken baby case?
No, he was accused of killing his former employee, Bertha Tardy, and 3
Oh, no, I knew you were talking about.
3 employees.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That case up in Winona. That's the case up in Winona.
Out on 6 trials.
Yeah, wow. That's kind of a
But no evidence really connected him. No damage. All circumstantial. And he was the only suspect.
I'll be serious about circumstantial evidence. I know people sometimes say that.
Mm-hmm.
That is a little bit misleading because I'm not talking about his case.
Right.
I'm just talking about if you're talking about circumstantial evidence. Because a lot of times circumstantial evidence can be pretty damning. There wasn't a witness that saw Byron D. LeBeckwith shoot Medgar Evers.
Right.
But you got his gun, you got his fingerprint on the gun at the murder scene.
Mm-hmm.
You've got people who saw his car parked there that night, or description matching his car. You've got him bragging to people. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All that is circumstantial evidence. It's not eyewitness testimony. There's you don't have an eyewitness saying, I saw him, he shot him, But but all that circumstantial evidence combined is pretty damning, I think. Let's say in his case.
But why you have 6 trials then, it was pretty damning.
I don't know about
Flowers' process.
I don't know about Flowers' case.
Oh yeah.
I'm not talking about Flowers.
Yeah, but they didn't find. I'm saying they didn't even found a fingerprint at the scene of the crime. They never found the murder weapon, and the murder weapon that could have belonged to somebody else. Like it matched somebody else's gun. This guy named Doyle Simpson.
Well, and,
It's like Troy Davis' case. I mean, they focus in on him, and the guy who probably said he did it was the one that probably killed the cop.
Yeah, it may have been. And that's what you got to be careful of a lot of times when you're investigating these cases. If there's a rush to judgment, you've got to be really careful. I know I've written about this Jeffrey Havard case. He's on death row, and basically you've got a dead baby, and so there's this presumption that he had sexually molested this child. There was no evidence of that. There wasn't any tears, there wasn't any semen, there wasn't nothing. But they concluded that because her orifice, your anal orifice relaxes when you go into a coma or you die. It's just an involuntary muscle. And so that's what they saw, and they presumed that, but there weren't any tears, there weren't any.
Okay, so how did they jump to that conclusion?
Well, you had all these doctors and nurses testifying, she was obviously sexually molested and abused, and from the ER. But that really wasn't proper testimony because they aren't qualified to say that. They're just saying it on the basis of what they supposedly saw. Yeah.
Jeffrey guy, was he black or poor?
He's actually poor white. Yeah.
Poor white. So that's right, because his sin is really being poor.
Yeah.
He couldn't afford a proper.
Yeah. No. He had a court-appointed lawyer, and they did a lousy job, and I don't think there's really a dispute about that.
I think a lot of times public defenders, though, in their defense, they have a case overload. Like they have so many cases.
I'm actually, what I see more often a lot of times is problems with court-appointed. Than with public defenders, because the good thing about a public defender is they're handling these cases, right? They're handling repeated criminal cases, whereas you have a court-appointed lawyer, you might get a court-appointed lawyer who's never done a death penalty case before, for example.
That's true. Okay.
And so that's what I mean. So either way, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good situation.
Let me ask you this. I mean, you like one of the best at what you do. You like one of the Michael Jordans of your craft.
I don't know about that.
I mean, like, you want to be up there, though. You got to
No, compare Michael.
Okay, I won't compare you, but
all right.
What is the future of investigative journalism in America? Is it dying?
Well, I think, obviously, it's been a tough period of time for us because newspapers financially have been going this way. But I see hope. I mean, I know here we have probably one of the best publishers in the country. And so our revenues now are back up, trending back up. So, but it's kind of becoming more innovative and creative. For example, and this has nothing to do with, investigative reporting, but just kind of bear with me. From a financial standpoint, we've got, we're doing this huge high school sports awards banquet, right? And so so it's going to be huge, and so that's money for this paper. And by having money, if you're able to create revenue in creative ways, then that helps to fund investigative journalism, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so I think as we become more creative, because there's a ways to do this, but if we have to become more creative in revenue generating ways, then we can have more investigative reporting. I don't think investigative reporting is going away, and we still have some great investigative reporting. It's just a matter of investigative reporting is more expensive.
Right.
And so you've got to find some way to pay for it.
Imagine this, like giving you a track record of breaking stories or covering stories and leading to court convictions. Have you ever been in fear of your life or received death threats?
Oh, I've certainly received death threats. I've had a bunch of those. I've had people threaten. They said they want to see me, my throat slit and my body laid on the street in Neshoba County. And I've had a guy said he had pictures of me and my family, knew where we lived, and so. But here's the wild thing. It has led to really kind of an unexpected gift for me, which is the gift of living fearlessly. Because, living fearlessly is not living without fear.
Right.
It's living beyond fear. And I'm sure you do that in what you do. You have to be courageous about what you do and standing up for what you do. One or the other. And so that's what living fearlessly is about. Living fearlessly is about living for something bigger than ourselves. And if we live for something bigger than ourselves, then it's not about us anymore.
That's true. Did you ever see yourself doing this? Like,
no.
You started. What was your goal becoming a writer? Like, what inspired you, and what was your goal?
Well, if you go way back, my high school, college years, I was interested in writing. And I actually had interest in, I did write some of this, interested in writing satire. And so I wrote a certain amount of like satire, which is kind of poking fun at different things. And so I did all that kind of stuff. But so it wasn't until I got into journalism itself and began practicing it that I got interested in investigative reporting. And then once I started doing that, I realized I was a better reporter than I was a writer. And that's just a gift. I didn't do anything to deserve that. So once I started doing investigative reporting, I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm a lot better at this.
What's the difference between being a reporter and being a writer? I mean, like, what's the difference?
Well, it involves both. I mean, reporting is just the aspect of going and gathering information and that kind of stuff and sorting it. And writing is just the actual act of taking that information and trying to convert it into something that people can understand.
Do you see yourself as a storyteller? You don't see yourself as a storyteller?
Yeah, I do. I tell stories. In fact, when I go around and speak, sometimes. That's what I do, is tell stories.
Now, who would you want to play you in a movie about your life?
Oh, no. Anybody play me. I think, and I don't know, I mean.
You never thought about that, about Hollywood never approached
you? I got played in Ghost of Mississippi. Right. I've been portrayed before, so actually. I don't know, part of me, there's part of me that doesn't necessarily appeal to. I mean, yeah, it would be a compliment in a sense of being portrayed on film or something like that, but I don't know. Again, I go back to the original one I said is that, getting to know these families is a lot better reward. I mean, maybe one day there'll be a movie made. I'm working on a book now. It'll be out next year.
Okay. You got a title for it?
Race Against Time.
Wow, that's a powerful title. Who's the most interesting person you ever interviewed? Or ever met?
Ever met or interviewed? One of the more interesting people I met was Bill Clinton. I mean, I interviewed Bill, and I still call them Bill and Hillary.
You from Arkansas, right? Really?
Well, I worked there. I grew up in Texarkana, which splits, it's half in Texas, half in Arkansas. So I kind of can claim Arkansas. Yeah, I was a reporter there, and I was in '82, and I covered Bill Clinton's comeback campaign, and so I got to hang out with him a little bit.
What was your thoughts about him? What do you think about him?
He was the absolutely most charming person I ever spent any serious time with. He was just a really interesting guy.
You think about what's going on now with his wife running for president. Like, what do you think about? Did you ever saw that when you was covering them back in the day?
Yeah,
they'll do these type of things.
Oh yeah, no. If you would ask me at that moment in time, she always, and this is not denigrating him. I actually thought she was brighter than him.
I think a lot of folks think that, actually.
Now, that's not to say that and I'm not saying that Bill's not smart, and he's extremely smart. Right. He's extremely smart. He's not just smart, he's extremely smart. But what I'm telling you is, I think she's smarter, and that's not to knock him. And so at that moment in time, this was '82, if you asked Bill a question, he was a politician, know. If you asked Hillary a question, she answered. And so I had, and you could see that distinction at that point. Now, her at this moment in time, I'm sure has had to learn how to answer as a politician, but at that moment in time, that was.
She most definitely had to learn. She got a lot of practice in.
Yeah, this is '82. She got a little more practice. But in '82, she answered very directly. Everything I asked her, I remember getting her to talk.
Let me ask you this about Neshoba County, your thoughts about Neshoba, because that's where Ronald Reagan came out,
Yeah, he did.
And that was like a very interesting statement, because I saw the Lee Atwater documentary, and Lee Atwater was an interesting character in himself.
Oh, no question about that. And he kind of regretted. Look, Atwater kind of, I guess, talked a little bit about that with regret. And obviously, that place, Neshoba County, had certain baggage and background, and I don't know if it's intended or not intended, but obviously, it certainly is saying, this is what I think about states' rights. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, Reagan was the governor when the Black Panthers came on the scene, and they changed the gun laws and all that stuff. So he got his own street cred as well as doing the dirt.
I have to tell you this. I have to tell you, you get a kick out of this. I had an African American guy tell me this. He said, if you want to get rid of conceal and carry in Mississippi, let me tell you how. I said, okay. How would you do it? He said, I'll tell you how I'd do it. He said, just get about 2 or 3 busloads of black men to show up at one time and sign up for conceal and carry. And he said, and I guarantee you, before the last bus leaves, they'll be having a special session of the legislature to amend the conceal and carry law.
That's right. I bet it worked. It worked in California with Reagan. It worked out. But actually, they had theirs out. They had, you had the right to carry your gun out without fear of any problems. Let me ask you one more question.
Sure.
Sam Bowers.
Yeah.
I want to ask you because I think he's a fascinating guy. Klan. He was the leader of the Clavering now in Neshoba County, the White Knights.
Well, he was the leader statewide of the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, which was he was Imperial Wizard, and the White Knights were the most violent Klan organization in the United States, responsible for at least 10 killings that we know of. So yeah, he ordered the killings of the 3 civil rights workers. Was involved in the Vernon Dahmer case. He got convicted of that finally in 1998. And died in prison. So. Yeah.
Do you ever get a chance to talk to him?
I did, but like that long.
That long?
I talked to him one time about the Dahmer case, and it was a very brief conversation, and that he never talked to me again. He hated the press. He wouldn't talk to the press.
Well, my thing is this, from my understanding, he had got a degree in engineering from USC.
He didn't get a degree there.
He didn't get a degree? He didn't?
No. He never.
But he did study at USC, right?
You're correct. He studied engineering. He actually went for a semester to Tulane and then transferred with a buddy of his to USC. According to Bowers' own words, he just, didn't do anything. I mean, basically didn't study. He got, went out running cars and drinking and, all that kind of stuff. And that he didn't apply himself to studies by his own admission.
But it's like he was like, what I get from reading stuff, that he felt like he was a crusader. He was leading a holy crusade.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely correct. But anyway, he came back to Laurel, to Jones County, and he ran like a pinball. He had like a pinball amusement device company. I actually went there one day to see him, but I never did get to see him in person. I was trying to talk to him in person. Yeah, it's real fascinating. He lived his amusement device company was smack in the middle of the African American community.
See, I want to get back to that with the Bryant thing. Y'all did the 30th anniversary of the Emmett killing.
That's right.
And I read about it online. I never forget when the lady or somebody from the reporter interviewed Roy Bryant in the Delta.
That's right.
He was back in the Mississippi Delta.
Right.
And he said something to the fact that the black folks today are not afraid like they was in the 50s, but they don't know who I am, because they knew who I was, I'd be dead. But like, speak to what the work you're doing is about. You like a forensic artist. You uncovering stuff that happened 50, 60 years ago.
Sure.
Does it kind of make you feel sad that a lot of our young people, or even older people, are not aware of this history?
Yeah, well, that's why I do what I do. I have on Facebook and on Twitter every day, as you know, I kind of remind people of the history. Here's what's fascinating to me is I have a number of African Americans come back to me, like my age even and older, and say, I never knew that.
Right.
And so it's history themselves that they've never been taught. For understandable, for many years they weren't allowed to teach that. Same thing on the white side of the equation. When I came up, they wasn't taught.
Right.
And so we've kind of had a whole generation or two of people that weren't taught this. And so it's almost like new information to a lot of people. When I put it out, and I have whites that do the same thing. They'll come back and say, I never knew that. They never taught me this in school. And so it's hopefully people learning about these things.
I talked to blues great Bobby Rush. He said he talked to a high school in Tallahatchie County, and he would tell them about Medgar Evers, and the kids never heard of Medgar Evers. And he lived in Tallahatchie County at one point.
I rest my case.
In Georgia. I mean, he's equivalent.
I rest my case. Well, another good example, when they started picking the jury, for the Medgar Evers case, they actually picked the jury, instead of picking them here, they picked them up in Pinellas County, Batesville. A lot of the people who were potential jurors, African Americans, white and black, didn't know Medgar Evers.
And he's like a national hero. He's buried in Arlington. I mean,
I know.
But that's crazy. But my thing is this about Mississippi. I think it's kind of interesting. If you're not going to prosecute the folks still walking around for these cold cases, and you making all this money off the blues trail and off the civil rights movement, how come not make the teaching of this history a part of the curriculum, really push it, and really make textbooks around this story? I
will say they have taken some steps that way. Now I can't tell you, I haven't been into all the classrooms to know how effective they've been, or how they're doing in terms of implementing it itself. But in terms of the law, from the legal perspective, within recent years they are now requiring civil rights curriculum. You have to learn civil rights history if you are a Mississippi student.
So in order to graduate, you got to learn it. Yeah. Oh, that's good. So they got a state test or something like that?
Well, they don't have a standardized test. That's not a bad idea. But they're required to do that. And so now you're starting to see, I saw the 9th grade textbook. That's the Mississippi history textbook, which is what contains it. It's all through there. And so that is one of the 9th grade textbooks that they use. So that made me feel good. It made me feel good about that. Kids are learning about a lot of these cases we're talking about.
That's cool. So
they're not just learning about Medgar Evers. They're learning about Vernon Damer. They're learning about other heroes, and they're learning about Fannie Lou Hamer, for example. They're learning about so many others that kids need to know this. Like I posted today, probably a lot of people don't realize, Ida B. Wells, 61 years before Rosa Parks, boarded a train and refused to give up her seat.
That's right.
So people don't know that. And
she won the case that got overturned in the higher court.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something they need to know. But I'm thankful for the work that you do. Yeah. Now, how can people follow you?
On Twitter, probably the easiest thing is follow me on Twitter, and then you can see my Facebook link. On Twitter, it's J Mitchell News. So J and then Mitchell, Mitchell News, News. And you can follow me on Twitter there, and Facebook. My Facebook link is there. It's just Jerry Mitchell, I think 5872 or something, because I'm not the only Jerry Mitchell. So.
Cool. And also you work at the Clarion-ledger too.
I do. I have a blog. You can go on to clarion-ledger.com, and I have a Journey to Justice blog that people can follow.
I commend people. I'm definitely going to post all that throughout my
thanks. Yeah, if you'll post that, I appreciate that.
It's very important work. And you got any closing thoughts?
I just think that my hope is that, we can, as a nation, we can, it's so easy, I think, for people to have preconceptions, black or white. And so I would just challenge people to just look at those preconceptions we have about people before you make a judgment, and realize that we all have prejudices, and that there's a certain amount of that exists, but we can move beyond those and begin to judge people not on the color of their skin, as King said, but on the content of their character, and that's when we'll become a great nation, I feel like.
I want to thank you, sir, so much for your time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for coming on down, man.
Love you madly, sir. I'll give you this as well, too. This is We All Be Lifetime Achievement Award. That's my
that's awful sweet.
You got a lot of great work still to do.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. thanks so much.
Yeah, it's an honor. You do a lot of great work.
Well,
It's the
thanks
least I
so
can do.
much. I love that.